It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, September 1st, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is really interested in how the NHL structures the national TV schedule.
Yeah, it seems a little different now.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that, plus answer your mailbag questions and give the results of our latest summer poll all on today's show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here, as always, with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We as a show are also on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky at Locked On Flyers as well. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. You can find us for free on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, we are in the calm before the storm right now, I think, with the Flyers and the NHL. So a little bit of news to talk about here leading into our national TV schedule discussion. Jay O'Brien did sign a contract, which is good to hear. I'm glad he landed somewhere. He's got an AHL deal with the Toronto Marlies.
Yeah, see, and this is what I was saying. I figured someone would hire him at least for AHL depth to start and then kind of see what he's got. And yeah, I mean, for the Leafs and Marlies, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, so there's a chance that the Phantoms will see him at some point this season, depending on the schedule and whether or not he gets that NHL contract and moves up or not. But a very good chance that we'll at least get to see him play a pro game or two this season.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to see him play a game unless he gets hurt. That's for sure. And then, yeah, if he becomes an NHLer at some point, we're going to have to revisit this and replay tape that I had stated, because I think it's a risk that they took the second round pick. So I'm kind of interested to see what O'Brien can do.
Yeah, same. One of our own of the past was added to the TNT broadcast crew, and that's Brian Boucher. He's been, of course, a part of national TV broadcasts, but he is new to the TNT crew this year. And man, I love what Brian Boucher's broadcasting career has become. I just think he's smart. And this is like my goaltender theory and why I think Henrik Lundqvist is really good and will get better as the time goes on, is that goalies just have a unique perspective on the game and they watch things develop. And so they're able to talk about the game in a way that maybe some skaters aren't.
Right. It's sort of like the quarterback view for the NFL. You don't want every guy to be a quarterback. You want them to be different positions, and even sometimes they don't have to be players. They don't have to, to do certain jobs. But I'm just saying it does give you different perspectives. So sometimes it's good to get a goalie's view. Sometimes it's good to get a defenseman's view. So I do like that. But as far as between the benches, to get a goalie's view is pretty important. So I think that while Keith Jones will be missed, it'll be a good addition.
Yeah, I think so too. So we'll be happy to see his face on TV this year. And speaking of seeing faces on TV, the Flyers, we knew we're going to have 12 national TV games this year, but we didn't know exactly which ones they would be and what networks. And so we got that information this week from the Flyers: 7 home games and 5 on the road. The first one of which will be October 19th versus Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, I mean, some of these they've gotten because they happen to be at a really good time against a really good team. Like that's the way it is. And then some of them are because of Flyers too, because they do draw pretty good numbers. But a lot of these are fortuitous teams, and you see McDavid and you see Bedard, and Carolina is definitely going to be in the mix, and you got Pittsburgh and you got the Rangers, and so Vegas, getting them on the East Coast. So, the Flyers, it works out because they're at a decent time zone and they have a pretty good crew too, as far as people that will watch games, fan wise. So that's why I think you've seen 12 where, there are teams that are just struggling. Like Arizona, I heard on the radio, has one as an example. And so for all the talk of this great TV market that we always hear for Arizona, why would you only have one national? I don't know. It's not my forte, but I'm just saying. But with Philly, a lot of these make sense. And yeah, to get McDavid, Bedard, Crosby, that's 3 no-brainers right there.
Yeah, I do think the breakdown of the schedule and which games we got were really interesting. So I mentioned the 7 home games, 5 on the road, but of the network breakdown, 4 of them are in TNT versus 1 on ESPN. There are 6 other ESPN games, but they're the ESPN Hulu exclusive, like streaming games.
Right,
They're
right.
not the big network games. We only have 1 on the network ESPN game, which I think is it's wild, right?
It is. Yeah, that's again, I can't pretend I understand the whole breakdown as to why this is advantageous for the NHL, because I don't. If anything, fans get driven crazy because you don't know what they're on, where they're on. They just had all these 12 games get switched by a half hour. If you're a season ticket holder, and now you got to all of a sudden be there, an extra half hour because it's a 7:30 game. You get home a half hour later. Like, I'm not going to pretend these are like, easy for people to deal with, because some of them are not going to be easy for people to deal with. So there's that.
Yeah, we talked earlier in the week about the schedule in general, and we mentioned the October 24th game against Vegas, which is the last game in that every team in the NHL plays that day. That is the one ESPN network game that the Flyers have, and puck drop is at 11 p.m. Thank God that did not push to 11:30, right?
Oh, I know. It's just, yeah, 11's bad enough. Like, I've already circled that one and I'm throwing darts at it.
Right. I think we all are. The one game on ABC is, of course, the outdoor game, which we talked a lot about earlier this week as well. I think in terms of the way the schedule fell, in terms of what months, there are no national TV games for the Flyers in December and January. They're clustered in October and November, but then we skip December and January, and then we don't get any others until February, and then they're clustered in February to early March.
Well, but that's the way the national TV schedule is generally anyhow. And I don't know why, but they, I get why they want to have a lot at the end. That part I get, but some of the other breakdowns I don't get. But it just seems like there's times where they just want to stay far away from like the NFL. And then, like on Christmas, they want to stay far away from the NBA. So I guess maybe that's why.
Yeah, and the NHL has a Christmas break and just gives that to the NBA and the NFL, right?
Yeah, they don't even try.
Yeah. That'll be interesting to see if they ever decide to take a stab at that. But
someday, maybe.
I don't know. Yeah, and then the one game that's a national TV game against Pittsburgh, which I think it feels like a record low of only having one national TV game against the Pens for the Flyers, but that's not until February 25th. And it's on the road in Pittsburgh in the afternoon.
Yeah, I think the thought process is, let's get one Flyers Pens game in there rivalry wise. Maybe the Flyers will still sort of be in it, fakely, the way the playoffs are, the NHL math, and maybe that's the thought process. Like, all right, if we wait too long, they'll just be too far out of it, and the fire won't be there. Maybe at least this one there'll be some fire still.
Yeah, and it's on TNT, and I bet they have like a doubleheader that day. So the other game that day will be a big marquee game, but they'll throw in Flyers Pens as like a carrot for earlier in the day.
Yeah, an appetizer.
Yeah, exactly. But so there's your national TV schedule. We'll put a link to the Flyers announcement about it in the show notes in case you weren't sure. Hopefully all your calendar apps will update with the updated puck drop times for you, so to make it easy.
Mine didn't.
On you. Well, I have something that's like connected to a feed, so hopefully it takes care of itself. In the meantime, we do have your mailbag questions to answer since we didn't have a mailbag on the Wednesday show gotta have a mailbag with Russ, right?
I appreciate it.
So we will get to that coming up next.
Football season's about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Take some time to visit FanDuel and include money lines, props, etc. around your team.
Coming up on the show next week, of course, we'll have another summer poll question for you, plus the latest on Morgan Frost and what's going on with Hockey Canada. It's Friday today. We might have a late news drop at the end of the day today. Who knows? And we'll have something to talk about then. But if not, we still got to talk about it because we're getting closer to the season, right?
True. Yep.
All right, getting to your mailbag questions. I love this YouTube username, Board Hockey Time 1770. He mentioned the outdoor game in Tahoe, which we did not talk about in our schedule review when we were talking about the outdoor game. And I think it's because there were no fans there, that it wasn't something like that we could attend, right?
Yeah, we couldn't attend. I mean, technically I could have, but you were going to be quarantined and it was a whole thing. So I didn't do it. It was a debacle for Carter Hart. It was a debacle to watch. It was a debacle, period. We'd like to forget that game ever happened, honestly.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it never did happen, right?
Yeah.
So we do recognize that we didn't mention it. Just wanted to throw that out there. Flyers jerseys were not that great. And again, it was just a disaster on the ice. Plus, I think the Bruins really outdid the Flyers in terms they had those like matching outfits and wearing like summer beach gear out in the snow. It was a whole thing. Although we did get gritty snowboarding out of the whole thing. So I'm going to take that as the one small victory there.
There you go.
All right, our next question comes from Brian. What do we think the Philadelphia Flyers are going to do the rest of the offseason? And what do you think they're going to do in the regular season? Do you think they'll make the playoffs this or next season?
I mean, the rest of the offseason, maybe they'll have one PTO that'll come into camp. As far as training camp, we kind of know and have covered that they're going to give everybody the impression they can make the team. There's a fair amount of veterans, though, so it's only a limited amount of young guys that can make the team, but there'll be at least some young guys on the team to start the season, and that's good. I don't think they're a playoff team this year, and I don't think they're going to be a playoff team next year. I think to get out of the mushy middle is very hard, and right now they're kind of like really like they're over their head in that. And I think at each season as it goes, they'll get less over their head in that, but it's hard to get out.
Yeah, I think there's no way they're making the playoffs this upcoming season. I think beyond that, it's going to be whether or not, like, we're going to have to see what happens with Couturier and Atkinson, which is a huge thing we talked about on the show last week. And I think that's going to make a big difference in terms of how quickly they can even get to the mushy middle. I don't even think they're in the mushy middle yet.
Yeah, right? They may not be.
They're below that. And I think it also will depend on the rest of the division, that so many other teams are making moves and making changes. And, we'll get to more of them in our season preview crossover shows around the network. But I just think it's a tough division to move up in right now. So it may take, 3 years before we're even at near the top of the mushy middle.
Right. I think that's accurate. I think that's what's probably going to happen.
Yeah. Dennis wants to know, what will the biggest surprise at training camp be in terms of who will make or who is battling for a roster spot?
The most surprising thing at training camp might be who is in net and who isn't in net, because we're going to end up getting this information from Hockey Canada late. And I think, that could really affect things.
Yeah, I've talked about this before, but I don't feel like Elliot Denoyer has been in the conversation a lot about making the roster out of camp. And I really feel like he's going to come in guns a-blazing and really want to, make a point that even if he doesn't make the roster, that he's the first phone call that they should be making for a call up, and that he can make it at the NHL level. So I look for him to really, look to battle, especially up against the vets that they've signed. If there's any chances for that in the scrimmages, I think he's going to be like, look, you signed these guys, but I'm right here.
I like it. I like that. I hope he does adopt all that. That would be great.
Yeah, I certainly hope he does too. We also got a couple of questions about the new Women's Pro League. And the first one is a really good question. Why hasn't the NHL bought into the PWHL financially like the NBA has with the WNBA?
I was listening to Brian Burke on SiriusXM talking about it because he is now the commissioner. And
Right.
he even acknowledged, right now they've only like dipped their toe in the water. And we always heard for the last couple of years, well, once there was one team, one league rather, one entity, that they would go all in, and they're not going all in. They're giving support with like the All-Star game, getting some people in there like they did with Kendall Coyne, but they're not going all in financially. And so I understand this new league is going to be brash and say, oh yeah, we got deep pockets. And Brian Burke did mention in this interview that they can go a couple years. All that's well and good. But at some point, I think it's just, and the NHL sent out like this preemptive sort of press release that was kind of like, well, we know you've been asking about this question, and no, we're not really involved. We're just supporting.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've covered women's pro hockey and been involved in women's pro hockey for almost 10 years now. And we do so over on Locked On NHL every other Friday. But I think that it is really baffling to me in a lot of ways, because I feel like the NHL is dangling this carrot that they're never going to give. And it's like, well, we'll support, when it was just the CWHL. Well, we're looking to see about viability, or wait till there's more of a presence in America, right? And then, the NWHL comes along. It's like, well, now we can't because there's two leagues and we can't pick one. And then the CWHL folds, and then they're like, well, we don't know. And like, it's just this thing that has continued where the NHL has been supportive in terms of special events. Like, I will give them credit for that.
Sure.
But they just have been like dangling this carrot that they're never willing to give.
I mean, I'm going to go back to, again, that outdoor game in Gillette Stadium where I talked to people. I was writing they should get a hockey card deal. I kept hearing, oh yeah, this could happen. Never happened. I tried 3 or 4 times to get a book deal. Oh yeah, there's a lot of interest in women's hockey. Nobody will sign a book deal. Like, this is the same thing that Rachel's talking about, and it's really kind of infuriating in the sense that for a lot of lesser sports, and I'm not going to name them all, or even just lesser leagues, there are people that go in full bore with money a lot easier than they do with women's hockey. Like, women's hockey, there just seems to be this roadblock where there's not enough support from the outside. Now, it's great that they have a league, and it's great that the finances are getting better as far as what they're getting paid, and they may not have to get secondary jobs, but there's a lot of other things they could make money from and draw revenue from that are still not available to them, and I don't get it.
Yeah, and I have many thoughts about the announcement. That thought it was great. I like what they're doing in terms of the player structure. The salaries are like mostly there where they could be better, but it's a good start, let's say.
Yeah.
There. But they didn't have any team nicknames. They didn't have any team rinks to announce, which I think is a huge problem, because when you say a New York team, but they could play anywhere from North Jersey to like Bridgeport,
that's a big problem. Like,
that's
again,
a problem.
if they're playing at the Devils practice rink, it's okay, the Devils practice rink, right? But yeah. I mean, it should be better than that. It really should be. It should almost be Nassau Coliseum. Like, there's a whole Nassau Coliseum not being utilized. That would make sense. So I don't know. That's what I would like to see, more of that. And you're spot on that.
Yeah, I mean, so far they're saying it's only going to be at AHL or OHL kind of caliber rinks, which is great, but like just tell us, like, or wait to make the announcement until you
Right.
have that. Like, it just feels like everything is rushed right now. So
Well, it is.
we'll
I mean, things
see.
are starting, like, you got a draft starting in September, free
Yep.
agency, like,
September
in a
18th.
way,
Yeah.
yeah, in a way, it is being rushed.
Yeah. But the other big question that we got was with all that announced, is there a chance to have a team in Philly ever? And
I mean, there should be. Again, they have a great situation in Voorhees. They and other rinks around if they needed to play like a couple different places in a 2 week period or something. I recommend it online. Go with Pittsburgh and Philly. You got an instant built-in rivalry. It's easy to get to both places. They can bus there and back. So it's a natural rival that would be easy to add if you could add the two teams. To me, that seems like a no-brainer. But again, they went with what they went with now, and we probably can't expect expansion for at least another year or two. So we'll see. But yeah, should they get a team? Yes.
I do too. I think the support is there. And I think in the pro sports space, Philadelphia gets neglected because it's like sandwiched in between New York and DC, which seem to get all the teams. That's what's happened in basketball. That's what's happened in soccer. And it's very frustrating that I think just for geographic reasons, Philly has gotten squeezed out of this conversation. And I think it's a raw deal. And I think that has to change.
Well, I mean, I'm going to go, one step further. If for some reason, uh, and I don't know, you said they're all AHL, OHL caliber ranks, but if for some reason, let's just say that the New York team ends up in New Jersey somewhere, and it's not where the Devils play at the Rock. Philly could do better than that, and they could beat that. And so that's where I would say, if they played at Lehigh Valley as an example, that would beat that, except the Rock. So
Yeah.
that's my basic point. It's nice to have a New York moniker on it, but unless you're
Yeah.
playing in a marquee place, it doesn't matter if it's in New York. Philly would actually be better supported.
I know, got it. And it would even be great if they could squeeze them in at the Penn Ice Rink, the class of 23
Oh
arena. I
yeah,
think
that's a little small. It's a great rank though.
yeah, yeah. But as a starting off point, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's not a bad option either. Well, that will do it for our mailbag this week. We have your poll results for the games you're most looking forward to this season, and we will get to that coming up next. All right, so we asked y'all out there which game this season you're most looking forward to and put that out in a poll with some options to choose from. We had the October 12th season opener against Columbus, the October 17th home opener against the Canucks, the November 24th Black Friday afternoon game against the Rangers, of course, the outdoor game February 17th, and that March 1st trade deadline day game versus the Washington Capitals. And, this was, I think, a little closer than I would have thought. I would have thought the outdoor game would have far outshone the other ones, but that game got 38%. And we had two other games with significant votes. We had the October 12th season opener at 29% and the March 1st trade deadline day game against the Caps at 20%.
Yeah, I think that's good for the deadline day. I know I knew there would be interest. I actually thought season opener would win. I just thought the outdoor game might not win because of the extra travel and pricing and all of that. It's interesting results for sure. I mean, the season opener more than the home opener is interesting. The home opener is almost the least. So
Yeah.
again, that's a warning sign to the organization. Like, is the home opener not going to be sold out? Probably not.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I certainly hope it is. I would love to see a really great atmosphere to show support for the organization and that everybody's behind this rebuild and we're going to kick it off right this home opener.
Yeah, I
And
think they're going to have to really press it though now these next couple months to get it filled. Because I'm not saying, the cross section of this show is exactly what is happening with the Flyers fan base, but it's an alarming number for the home opener.
Yeah. So we had the home opener at 7% and the Black Friday afternoon game at 6%. I do love that trade deadline day game got 20%. I think everybody's going to be intrigued about what moves the Flyers make around then. So
that
it's a
was my
big
thinking
game.
initially. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Chris, who voted for that game, said this is the only game that individually has an impact on next season. Plus, the anticipation of who is playing and who is scratched for the players and the fans will build for the week prior. I feel horrible for the players suffering leading up to the deadline, but for us, it's an exciting time, and I think that nails it right there.
It does. That's well said, actually.
Yeah. In terms of other games that we didn't list that people came up with, Brendan suggested the New Year's Eve game at Los Angeles. New Year's Eve hockey is one of my favorite things. Could not agree more. 10 years ago now, I did a big Flyers road trip where I went to 5 games in 8 days out west and followed them around. And I went to the New Year's Eve game in Calgary. One of the most fun times I've ever had. They had like fireworks in the building and then got to celebrate New Year's in mountain time afterwards. It was a really good time. And
Did you have a few? Did you have a few drinks?
I might have had a few drinks, but that's neither here nor there, right? And then the other option, Ryan suggested a second choice would be the first game against the Blackhawks in Chicago, which would be the first time for us to see Bedard up against the Flyers. We had mentioned in our rundown the home game against Bedard so that fans could see him up close, but the first game against the Blackhawks is on the road, so that is a good option as well.
It is a good option. I mean, I could pretty much tell Flyers fans that I don't think Bedard will be able to have the same impact that Crosby has had against the Flyers, but you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to end things with a Flyers fun thing this week because the fun things in the off season are a little bit fewer and far between. Yes. So we have one, and the Flyers very cryptically, I would say, posted just some really cool pictures of Scott Laughton on Thursday or on Wednesday, pardon me, and just some really cool black and white picture of Scott Laughton. And so the comments, of course, are like, is he going to be the captain? Like, what is this about? Because it just seems like
I don't think it's a captain
picture. I think my cat agrees with it.
I think she agrees. I don't think it's a captain look. I think it's just a pensive kind of when is the season going to start kind of look.
Yeah, I think so. But I'm willing to go with the conspiracy theory here that they're talking about him because he might be the captain. All right, that will do it for today's show. Ellie here is looking forward to the weekend. I hope you are as well. We'll be back next week, of course, on Monday with our new nemesis of the week and a summer poll topic for you. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you, so you can send your mailbag questions in via Twitter at LockedOnFlyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on the app formerly known as Twitter at rmiriam.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great weekend, everyone.